Good evening, good afternoon, good morning to our global audience, and welcome to the third episode of Global Civilization Dynamics and the state of where we're at today. I'm here with my colleague Peter, and we're going to get right into it. First thing I want to talk about, Peter, is the most latest news coming from a Mag 7, as they call it in America, which is the Magnificent Seven, big tech companies. And it is the company Meta. And basically Meta has said, and let me get right to it so I don't make any mistakes. And this is all over, this is across all of news channels. So I just happen to be looking at an article called Meta will track employee mouse movements and keystrokes for training, for AI training. The report says. And then it says in parentheses, well, it doesn't say in parentheses, but it says, but not for the reasons you think. So this is an article on Mashable, but it's basically talking about how Meta is ramping up surveillance. And so this piece is about technology and surveillance. And it says that Meta is installing tracking software that can capture mouse movements and keystrokes for US-based employees, which is not new. Although at the turn of this decade, coming in COVID, coming out of COVID, there was a number of companies that were tracking employee movements to see if they're working. Meta's not saying they're going to do that. That's not it. They're using some novel point of view, saying what we're trying to do is mimic your keystrokes to train AI, because AI is struggling in those kinds of areas. And so that is something new. What do you think about that, Peter?
Well, of course, it's not new, as you say, but it is new in the sense that they're now coming out and saying, this is for your good. We're doing it. We're going to tell you about it. And by the way, you don't have a choice, because that's the way Zuckerberg apparently framed it. He said, if you're going to stay in this company, that's the regime you're going to be living under. So that just brings home to me the trend that we're seeing, that you as a productive member of a team, which is how we used to understand what a worker was, what an employee was, you are an object that we need to know better, simply to run you, or to treat you as a machine in a more efficient way. We're going back to Charlie Chaplin's Modern Times, but this is a new version of it.
That's very good. Let's see what else the article says. Meta's memo said the idea is to help AI agents improve tasks they are currently struggling with, such as using keyboard shortcuts. But in a different memo, reportedly sent to employees on Monday, and I don't remember what, so don't say that this was this past Monday. We're not saying that to our audience, of a particular Monday recently. I guess I could say it like that. And I don't want to say the name of the person, but it said a very key chief officer there said, to expect more internal data collection in order to make agents better at replicating, not replacing, replicating human work.
Replicate. Tomorrow they replace.
Yeah, it says the goal is for agents to do most of the work while humans sit back, monitor the situation. I would go far, my own opinion is that I don't see how companies are going to pay people to sit back and monitor the situation, or sure, one person to sit back and monitor for 50 or 100 or maybe 200 or maybe even 1,000 agents. It does say the vision we are building towards is one where our agents primarily do the work, and our role is to direct, review, and help them improve. So I want to say this, Peter, and to our audience. When we hear about these things and these incremental things that tech is doing, I have been thinking about this. Just because a major tech company is doing something and we have this worldwide FOMO, fear of missing out. I wonder when we will start to disconnect and say, look, just because a tech company does it, that doesn't mean I'm a CEO of a company and I should be doing it. And I'm thinking that's really important for people to understand. Just because one tech company does something doesn't mean anybody else should be doing it. What do you think about that?
Well, I totally agree with you. And I think a lot of people also agree with you that they consider this somewhat inhuman, but especially what's inhuman is the fact that you always have to follow the leader. Tech companies being perceived as the leaders, the people who have defined our future. And so I think there's a danger and there's a hope at the same time. The danger is that people fall into, or let's say, the bankers or the financial people fall into the pattern of, if you're not doing this the way the tech companies do it, and some boards think that way. I think managers are less likely to think that way. But boards and financial VCs and various people who are not involved in the actual production of whatever your company is producing, whether it's a good or a service, they may be thinking that way. And the real danger is just to assess how much power they have over the way our management techniques evolve, the way our enterprise culture evolved. So there's a lot of hope that people can realize that the people who know how the workplace works, and that supposes that we are aware, that we have the means of being aware without spying on people, without electronically or otherwise spying on people, that we can then make decisions that optimize the human capacity rather than focusing on optimizing the technical capacity.
I like what you said. And that requires strong leadership to move away of FOMO, fear of missing out, to recognize just because this is maybe a really great thing that this company is doing, great. Company is in the business of hyperscaling. That's what Meta is. It's a hyperscaler. If I'm in charge of a hospital, pharmaceutical company, a manufacturing company, chemical company, a fragrance company, a sports company, or any other company there is, that doesn't mean that model fits. And we used to have a wide variety of business ideas and models and companies doing different things. It's become less and less and less. So I think hopefully the pendulum has swung so far this way that we can start to become more diversified in our thinking. So I would agree. Tech companies have not been exactly the model of employee engagement practices or high culture dynamics. My mind is just thinking of at least a dozen, maybe several dozen lawsuits that have come out over the last 15 years. When you think about a company that walked out of a building in the last 10 to 15 years, what were the companies that you heard that people heard of a firing in their company, so they, like, a whole bunch of people would leave a particular building, right? I can think of many, many instances, and they all tend to be tech companies when people walk out for a day or two, and you hear some explosive thing that a particular person was fired for whatever reason. I mean, we're employees at will. So I agree. So that is about surveillance. And that actually leads and is a great segue to, I think, one of the biggest pieces of information and article themes that have come to me since our last episode. And I want to read a little bit of information about this so our audience can really be able to research on their own. There was a paper called the AI Layoff Trap. The paper was written by economists. That's important. And so what they're discussing is they've identified a systemic market failure as they're saying it, where competitive firms automate labor faster than the economy can recover, which means what we're kind of doing over the last 3 years. Hyper pushing in AI tech, laying off droves and droves of people, not once, twice, but some companies are on layoff round number 10, 12, right? Over the last 4 years. And what it's actually saying, and this is where the rubber meets the road, is peeling behind the layers or peeling back the curtain from a major economic system. What this is doing is it's creating demand externality. It's eroding consumer purchasing power. And what it really happens is because it says this, because each firm captures the full benefit of its own cost savings, but bears only a small fraction of the resulting aggregate demand destruction, they are locked in a prisoner's dilemma that results in deadweight loss for both workers and firm owners. So I'll stop and see what you think about that, Peter.
Well, I think it's a trend that's easy to understand given the trends that have existed for some time. The instinct and the reflex that a lot of company decision makers, whether it's at the board level or the management level, have seen compression of the workforce as the essential means of saving money, of improving profitability. It's built into the Milton Friedman ideology that we've all inherited. And again, we come back to the management and board problem, because the managers who are aware of what this means, of the dynamics of it, still have to please their board, who may be saying, as soon as they can announce that they're laying off a certain number of people, or that technology has allowed them to improve their efficiency in terms of just the number of people working for them, the board reacts very favorably. They get a raise in their salary. They get stock options or whatever the reward is. So we've got a system that's built to encourage people to think positively about anything that goes in that direction. That becomes a problem because it's built into the culture, not because it's part of the decision making. It's built into the culture.
And so here is I was thinking about a example to paint for our audience. And this is an example of what this whole thing is saying. And I think this is very interesting. Maybe I might want to present this to actually at a particular conference. But at the end of the day, let's pretend I am a phone company, and my brother next to me is an owner of a grocery company. And my other brother next to me here is an owner of a car company. And so what this is really saying, the way I'm saying it, I'm envisioning it, is how all systems bringing down the house happen is that I decide to lay off 1,000 people. By doing that, I capture, like it says, the full benefit of the cost savings. Do I? I think I do, because companies inside their corporate walls have maybe like horse blinders, right? So I now have reaped the benefits of saving 1,000 salaries. Here's the thing. Those people that were laid off, I still think they're going to use their phones and their powerful phone packages, monthly packages. But those people got laid off, and now they're not shopping as much grocery shopping, and they've reduced their monthly grocery bills or weekly grocery bills by half. So now my brother is complaining to me like a couple of weeks later. And I'm like, wow, really? He's like, yeah, it's because of all these people that got laid off from the phone company, your company. Now they're not buying groceries at my place. In fact, I have a 30% reduction in sales. I now have to lay off 1,000 people. You do? Yeah. And then a month later, I go and I see that I had people that had robust family plans with 3 or 4, and a lot of people had 2 phones and stuff like that, but now they're cutting their phone plans. I did not see that coming. So now that those people, the people that got laid off by me couldn't buy groceries and reduce them. People that got laid off by groceries are now cutting back on their phones. And even now my own people, because they need to spend more money on essential items like groceries, because he's now jacking up the price, they're reducing their phone bill. But because of my layoff and my brother's layoff at the grocery, those people have decided they don't need those new cars and those 7-year leases that they had. So they're returning their cars to the new car dealership saying, listen, we're defaulting on our loans. We can't afford it. So all these cars are going back. And my older brother comes to our quarterly reunion and says, man, everyone's returning all their cars because they got laid off at the phone company and their grocery company. And so now they can't afford my car. And now I have this explosion in all these cars that are being sent back to me. Boy, I'm in big trouble. I'm laying off 2,000 people. And now they're going to cut costs more here. See, so what we haven't really realized, or I don't think a lot of people, whether it's corporate or whatnot, but maybe it's now we're coming to where the rubber is meeting the road, right? This is an all systems failure. If you're just going to take things away from one group, well, that group's going to come back and right? It's a circular dynamic. And so I think that's what I'm trying to paint for our audience. What do you think about that, Peter?
Yeah, I mean, to some extent, you could go back to Henry Ford, who realized that if you didn't pay sufficient wages to people, they could never buy your products. Not that you were expecting your workers to be your principal customers, but Henry Ford understood that it had an effect across the whole society. And what's happened is, and we all know this, the U.S. economy is 70% of the economy is consumer. It's a consumer economy, unlike China. So if we do the comparison with China, they've focused on export rather than internal consumption. My high school classmate, Stephen Roach, who has been spending a lot of time in China, a great economist, complains that he's actually advised the Chinese government that they must make an effort to build the consumer economy inside China. And he's absolutely right that most people see that there's a deficit of dynamism in the economy, and what people like Madam Yellen complained, I think it was, people have complained about overproduction in China. Maybe the Chinese are right, because if you create an economy that's based up to 70% on consumption, when you start doing things that are focused on the logic of production, you may be undermining that. And that's what the technology is doing to us now, without people realizing how that effect plays out. So it's what you were talking about, not thinking about the unintended consequence, or any of the consequences for that matter.
Short-termism, isn't it?
Yeah.
Right. You don't think about you only think about that one thing in front of you. Not even in driving school, they teach you the car that's in front of you, see through the car in front of you. What's in front of that car? You don't want to be looking at just that car and that's all you ever look at. Look outside of that car. What's in front happening? Because when that person puts on the brakes hard and you're not ready, boom. So you're right. I mean, that's very good in saying it that way.
Still, we do have a problem because we have built a culture, and I come back to culture all the time, a culture of the consumer society. And you really have to be very careful about maintaining the balance, because anything that goes out of balance, as your illustration of the three brothers with three different sectors of the economy illustrates it. Once one thing gets out of balance, it puts everything else out of balance. But we do have to defend our culture of consumption. It's not my person. I would prefer people concentrate on the efficiency of production and the focus on people's actual needs. In an ideal society, we should not be trying to sell everything that we manage to manufacture and then create a lot of useless items. But we do have a society that's built on that. We have to find the right level of balance even for that. We can go in one direction or another, but you have to keep your hands on the steering wheel.
Well, we've already talked about surveillance. We've now talked about AI and the layoff trap. And to find balance, there's something that is deeply important to all systems, from individual to corporations to society in general. And that is trust. And when you don't have an equilibrium and a balance, and you start to break the balance and the equilibrium, and you have a seesaw that's up like this, right, where all things are in one area and they forego, whether it is a nation or it's a corporation, or even if it's a person. If you forget how to keep yourself in an equilibrium, you start to lose trust in areas. And so I had an interesting article that I read from Politico, and I'll cite some of the statistics for you, and then we can get into the conversation. And it says young Americans. And so whenever a lot of I want to say this, I hope that I say this every episode, but if I say something about Americans, whenever I say America or Americans, you may very well want to input UK or England or France or India or whatever it is. So this particular, because I think what I'm about to read isn't about just Americans, but it says young Americans continue to lose faith in government institutions. I don't think that's an American isolated American thing. I think young people are losing faith in government institutions, right? But since it's writing about Americans, young Americans are increasingly distrustful of government institutions. And a new poll, listen to this: Gen Z broadly voicing skepticism of all three branches of government to act as its best interest, according to a new poll from Harvard Kennedy School. And so they have the spring 2025 Harvard poll that reflects a deepening lack of trust in government. They stated that 19% of respondents expressed a trust in federal government. That number is just shocking, 19%. To do the right thing most or all of the time, according to the poll. Wow. Only 19%. That is amazing. Congress won the lowest vote of confidence from young respondents. 18% trusted the legislative body. And only the office of the president, it was only 23% had trust. 29% said they trusted the Supreme Court. Spring of 2025. We're in spring of 2026. I would imagine that has dropped. Now, I want to say that it says this: amid financial hardship and a devastating crisis of community, dollar signs and mind, peace of mind, right? Finance hardship. Are you kidding me? In the world's superpower, why is there financial hardship? And then a devastating crisis of community, a devastating mind, putting your mind at tax It says young Americans are increasingly disillusioned with the world as they struggle to find their place in it. I'm going to ask you, Peter, your thoughts before I give mine.
Well, again, this is a very visible trend. I'm surprised that we're talking about it as if it was something new. But you've got the convergence of so many phenomena, and I think we've talked about it before. But the Gen Z don't know whether they should go for an education or not. They've always been told they should, but then it just accumulates debt, and there are no jobs when they come out. Whatever they were being educated to do is not available for them to make a living out of. So that's how could you trust a system that has been telling you to do things that as soon as you pay for them, you realize you've been cheated. That there's the outcomes that were promised simply don't exist. So that kind of thing is very disturbing. Now, I'm not surprised that there's a focus in the U.S. on government, on trusting government. Because government doesn't do anything for people. In Europe, it's probably different. People mistrust politicians, but not necessarily governments, because the governments we have a kind of generalized welfare system in Europe, which is under extreme pressures, becoming very vulnerable because of the stupidity of our politicians. And this I would analyze at a different level. The decisions they're making and have been making, which they're beginning to understand, have pushed them into a rather embarrassing corner, are potentially undermining the one thing that keeps the population in a state of relative trust, because the institution, we have healthcare. So, everywhere in Europe, you don't have to worry about losing your whatever savings you've managed to acquire, supposing that you're not your personal finances are not defined by the student debt you're still trying to pay off. If in Europe, you just don't have that worry, that day-to-day worry that exists in the U.S. So that kind of precarity that's been created by the system itself means that trust will evaporate even faster. But in Europe as well, we're losing ground. We're losing the ability to trust institutions. Young people have very much similar situations as far as education is concerned, because the job prospects are not there, even though they've used their free education to acquire some kinds of credentials. So it's a universal problem, I think, or a general problem, at least in the West, but it doesn't play out the same way in different countries.
Right, that would be true.
And I would add one thing. The mistrust is not, as I said, the mistrust today in Europe is more targets politicians rather than governments, but that may change as budgets and the financial management of governments of nations in Europe is in a very precarious state, and we're seeing that in the elections. We're seeing that in the parliamentary deliberations. It's pretty much a mess. But I would add one other thing, and that is that and this is true everywhere, I think, there's no trust in the media as well. And the media used to guide us. The established media, we call mainstream media, it used to play a role of normalizing a number of things and actually creating a sense of responsibilities at various levels of society by defining the expectations. and aligning that with the actual possibilities of the economy. That has disappeared, and people are even more mistrustful of media than they are of Congress.
Well, there's a lot of mistrust, and it's coming from everywhere. So you're hitting on media, and that's great because we're going to go right there next. But I want to just comment, and for our viewers that happen to be younger and Gen Z, if there is one thing that I hope Gen Z does learn, that I think our whole system is trying to take away from every generation that comes, that is the youngest Gen Z, that is the youngest. It is that they're not, Gen Z is not, they've been kind of, I believe social media has a big part in playing that. They're not learning as much from older generations. And that actually comes to, at the end of the day, not being mentored by older generations, not learning from the mistakes that are happening in an older generation. It's inevitable that history repeats itself. And so what you don't get to learn is that how you feel. You should know that during the Great Recession of 2008, which lasted 5, depending on how you look at it, because if you look at the stock market, it's like what the stock market always does. It doesn't do anything. It has nothing. When you lay off people, stocks go up, right? It doesn't. They don't. There's not a balance there. What I'm trying to say is that was during the millennials coming into the market, and there were 5 years of extreme strain. Now, if you go back to the year 2000. Another 10 years, 8 years, that was when Gen X was in, which are the parents of primarily of Gen Z. We had a .com crash. And then, like where I live in the northeast part of the east coast of the United States, 15 months after the .com crash, when the whole economy was reeling from it still, we had the 9/11 tragedy. So it's a double whammy. Now that lasted a good 4 to 5 years. So you can really see a repeatable pattern that this happens to every generation. And then how does every generation, what makes them resilient to move and win in those strategies? I would say to Gen Z, it would behoove you to speak and talk to older people, especially Gen X, who happen to be your parents, right? I mean, it doesn't have to be boomers and millennials too, but since that happens to be the people that are in your home, why not learn? Now, let me segue straight to where you just left off about media. You and I were talking earlier, about a week or two ago, about some ideas about where we are going to head, where I believe we're going to head, and I think you do too, about this current, hyper speed train we're on, about all systems go, automate everything and AI everything. So it is important to not read just everything that you see on your screen. And so there was a great article that basically says, and the headline, I got to show it because it's such a great article, it looks like. And so I actually read this, and it says, separate from your phone. Embrace critical thinking. Your thoughts should be your own. And boy, is that important. So in reading this article, I thought this was really impactful, and I think this is just going to grow to be even bigger and bigger. And so it started off by saying, let me just make sure I get the correct president. In 1955, it says, President Dwight Eisenhower suffered a heart attack after playing golf in Denver. And this shocked the nation, the United States, because he projected American strength and vitality. He was only 64 years old. He had a heart attack on the golf course. What this did was it ushered in they brought in a heart surgeon who described, and for the first time didn't just say, this is what happened to the president. He said, this is what's happened to the president, and this is about cardiac health, which we have not focused on as a nation. Over time, we got the food pyramid and this huge Jane Fonda craze about aerobics that exploded into the 60s. It really took off in the 70s and really was huge in the 80s. So things take time. And what the point of me saying that is because we're at a point where now the data is becoming overwhelming, and that is an increasing amount of research implies and is showing that consuming short form video content, short form, delivered by apps like TikTok and Instagram is associated with poor cognition and reduced attention. And that there was an experiment in 2023 that found that a mere presence of a participant's smartphones in a room, such as a business boardroom, significantly reduced their ability to concentrate. Amazing. Ultimately, more and more of these studies are revealing that a significant negative correlation between frequent AI tool usage and critical thinking abilities is coming to light. And then ultimately, I want to bring it home by this, and I don't want to forget this, brain activity of research subjects who were writing with the help of large language models found that brain connectivity systematically scaled down the amount of external support. The loss of our ability to think is a very big deal. What say you, Peter?
Well, I totally agree. Again, these are trends that a lot of people were aware of in their earlier iterations, but now they're coming to a head with, and AI is exaggerating that. But I think the article talks about particularly the aughts when we had that's when social media, well, people were already online and consuming things that were online, but that was also the period when video was actually feasible online. Those of us who remember the emergence of the web in the 1990s, video was not part of it.
No.
Video, we didn't have the technical capacity to get the bandwidth that allowed us to see video. So then you had video and then social media in the aughts. And that changed.
In 08, 09.
Yeah. So that changed the way the consumer society, which we were talking about earlier, saw not only the way they organized their social life, but professional life. And so you cite the statistics that became visible in the workplace of a loss of attention, a loss of concentration, a loss of productivity.
Yeah.
And the article disappointed me only in the sense because it was describing things that are extremely real and recognizable. But I don't know if it points in the direction of the kinds of solutions we could actually hope for. And I think there are solutions. I don't claim to be the owner of them. But the work I've been doing with AI has led me to theorizing a certain number of things. I'm not going to develop them here. But what I would say, just to sum things up, is that I think for the moment we're living with the wrong suppositions about what technology does for us, and that we can adjust them. But that's going to require a change of culture, and I always talk about that, which means that we have to really address this at the level of educations and families. And I know the article does talk about that. And you were talking about the generational lack of communication.
That's all part of what we discuss here at Global Civilization Dynamics. It does say, I mean, I love that.
It's just a question of discipline, as the article seems to, it's Cal Newport, right? The author of...
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, and it's called Stop Filling Your Mind with Digital Doritos.
Yeah. I don't think it's just a question of personal discipline.
No.
Because we may end up in the same kind of routine as you mentioned with the Jane Fonda and aerobics. If you think you can just now take time and stop and think, thinking is not just something you do spontaneously. It's culturally acquired. Now, I've insisted for a long time that we've neglected the humanities. I was trained in the humanities, not in technology, not in business, not in finance. And what you learn is not something you can apply easily in a professional, in a transparent way, in a professional setting. It's not something your boss will recognize as something that's increasing the productivity or the profitability of the company, but it's something that is actually essential, and which is being
essential, and it's part of having a lived experience. So let me get in because of what you're saying. So it says, in an era where technologies relentlessly disrupt our lives. Yes, it's true. I mean, every single person, you're trying to do something, how many ads come? God darn it. Get away. It's on their phone. And then depending on if you have a digital watch. I purposely don't have a digital watch because I see how distracted so many people are. You know, they're right in the middle of talking to me and and there's it's constantly. So if you're not, I think where you're headed is, if you're living your life in the phone, you're not living your life, period. And that if you're not learning from not just your peers, but your elders, aunts, uncles, older brothers, sisters, mom, dad, grandparents, bosses, and you're just getting it from people you don't even know who are that might not even have any field of education of what they speak of. You're not getting it from the people that are around you that might actually care about you, but you're getting it from somebody who doesn't know anything that they're talking about, nor do they even know that you exist. So I think what you're trying to say is that we're disconnected from our lived experience, which is how we became the intellectual and capable people throughout society up until this specific little blip moment in time. But this blip moment in time has the potential, expanded, is a couple generations, the 4 generations that are working in the world of work, and they're not operating well together, or quite frankly, with each other, or to our even customer base. So this is happening now.
I think it goes even further than that. I'm preaching for the humanities. What do the humanities do for you? They connect you with the past. It's about whether it's history, literature, the arts, it's connecting you or forcing you to come to terms with something that's difficult to understand, difficult to relate to because you haven't been trained or conditioned to interact with people who thought differently, who carried different assumptions, different cultural assumptions, different philosophical assumptions. And when you're exposed to that, and in a variety of ways, not just in one focused way, but you're exposed to different ways of being in the world, it allows you to be to deal with the complexity of even the workplace, which is not the most complex environment we have, but it is complex in the sense that anything you do in the workplace is connecting not only you with the people you're working with, but with your customers, with your suppliers, with the management network, and even the board, the financial structures that made that company exist. So the sense of complexity disappears if you focus only on what's immediately productive. And that's what our education has tended to. Standardized tests, for example. The focus on standardized tests, it means that you're only understanding what people today want you to understand.
You've made a great business case, which is the same one that I actually identically make, which is why I'm pro-education, not anti-education. And I'm actually pro getting degrees, not anti-getting degrees. And because your first freshman and sophomore year, not only do you get to live out of home for the first time ever, and get to interact with people, and which is how you interact eventually in the corporate world, is you take a whole bunch of classes in history, chemistry, physics, art, business, human resources, technology. Why? So you can have a foundation on all world complexities. Not
we did debate the value of a diploma at a previous session. And I'll only say this, because I've just been mentioning it, that if the way you conduct this experience, this broadening experience that you're describing, if the way you conduct it is on the basis of preparing yourself to do the best you can on a standardized test, then it's not, you're not getting the value that should be there.
Right.
So
you need to be able to. The degree prepares you for life.
Yeah.
Right. So to go past individual, what can we do individually? I already knew this. You probably already knew this. Probably a lot of but for the people that don't know, that Australia, governments can assist in efforts to improve digital nutrition. Australia recently enacted legislation banning social media use for kids under the ages of 16. Now, of course, it says, will kids get around it? What generation of kids don't get around stuff? I mean, that's just not a thing. Every generation of kids is always trying to do what they want to do. But it's imposing a law that says, hey, this ain't good for kids under this age. America has you have to be 21 and older to buy alcohol at a liquor store. It's true. That's a real thing. Obviously, in the past, there were times when it was at age 18. There was a period of time in less than, I think, 100 years ago when America had prohibition. So, and then they didn't have it. Then they had prohibition. Then they repealed it. So it is what it is. But culture dynamics will demand governments have to start to address this, all the things that we've been discussing: AI, advanced technologies, consumption, mega consumption. You know, how many digital Doritos are you eating a day? If you're eating 2 bags of Doritos per day, you need a doctor to tell you that was a bad idea. That isn't really about a doctor's. You know, you have to certainly. This is really where this is going, right? We're eating digital Doritos probably at 2 bags per day, right?
And so we've been talking about the society of consumption, the consumer
society of consumption, but consumption in moderation, aren't we?
Exactly. Well, that's the whole point. That's the whole point. That's going back to the preaching for the humanities. And it goes back to the point we were saying earlier. We have to learn how to achieve balance rather than focus on some arbitrary objective. That
we're very out of balance. I mean, the scales are tilted this way and nothing here. It's an all or nothing. Like you got short-termism, you've got all or nothing, you got winner take all, and then ultimately. Part of the article it says something like this. It says, put your phone down now and put it in a different room. Yeah, sure. You're going to read that and people, even our viewers, are like, well, I'm not going to do that. And here's the funny part. It says, this makes the act of a sustained contemplation of a battle of willpower. a battle we all too often lose. So ultimately, putting the phone down and in a different room only doesn't work really well until we get to a place where we really start to understand that, okay, this is really, really bad. I'm losing my mind. And when we can really understand that that's where we could be heading, not we could be, we actually, the data's already out. We are headed. We are in that tipping point. We're inside of that phase right now. And I guess the last thing I'll just say about this is I went to a restaurant a few months back, and I remember this. It's a family restaurant. A lot of sports screens are on. You got all generations eating, drinking, happily consuming sports. But I saw these two couples come in, and then they had their sets of kids. And each of the kid had a headset and a board. So there was 4 kids. None of them were talking to each other. In my time, all 4 of us were playing with each other and interacting with each other. Outside, inside, all the kids were playing with each other. All 4 of these kids didn't get to know each other. They weren't even talking to their siblings. They didn't talk to each other. Headphone, each one, 4 headsets, 4 bones, and the parents were talking. And so there is, even if we were to reverse engineer and say, okay, worldwide international commandments are released, right? Already X amount of people that have been living in a pure digital world, depending on what your age is, that's all you know. And so how much, as they're saying, how much digital wiring or how much digital consumption has not allowed for the wiring of the brain through lived experience, and what they're talking about reading actually not from digital but from a text to make your mind have all the synapses in the brains connect in ways that can really formulate powerful ideation for innovation. That's one example. Yeah.
Well, that's probably a good note to conclude on, even though it's a little bit depressing.
And so we hope we brought you, our audience, a thought-provoking episode this month, and we will look forward to bringing you another one, episode 4 next month. So on behalf of my colleague Peter, I'm Vinay Singh, and this is Global Civilization Dynamics. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Vinay.
Join the conversation at Fair Observer and subscribe to our YouTube channel.